Thank you for watching. My name is Kome. Today I'd like to talk about how photography rules may be related to how our brains are programmed for human survival and prosperity. If you are interested in photography, you must have heard about the photography composition rules. Some visual patterns like leading lines, symmetry, and rule of thirds make pictures more engaging. But why is that? I'm a software engineer, so I think about programming, including the programming in our brain. Even though we value the intellectual activities of the human race, most of the programs in our brains are still for animal instincts. Like smart people already said, the goal of our program is survival and prosperity of our species. This TED Talk by Denis Dutton elegantly explains how beauty corresponds to the important elements for humans to survive. As an example, he talks about how grass, trees, water, and animals in the landscape please our eyes. Then he says,
and finally, get this, a path or a road, perhaps a riverbank or a shoreline that extends into the distance, almost inviting you to follow it. And it hit me. This is a photography composition rule. Leading lines. These are all photography composition rules. If the composition rules are the guidelines to capture beauty, and if beauty is a guideline for thriving as a species, what if each composition rule corresponds to a behavioral pattern that helps the human race to survive and prosper? Let's start with the composition rule, foreground element. The rule says you can add depth to the image by adding a foreground layer. So, seeing objects in the foreground makes you comfortable. If you were an animal living in the nature and you saw something right in front of you, what would it mean? It would mean you were hiding behind a bush. I think our ancestors that felt comfortable seeing the foreground element in their vision were the ones that stayed behind the bush to hide from predators or to hunt for prey. They were the ones that survived and became our ancestors. As mentioned earlier, the leading line rule says the converging line draws your attention to the image. Prehistoric humans who liked seeing this pattern must have gathered around the river and started following the path to explore new territories. Eventually, they spread to many areas, survived local disasters, and kept developing as a species. There are robots that drive around using machine learning. You can program them by showing them images and tell them how to react to them. For instance, you can teach them to steer away every time it sees a pattern that looks like the boundary of the area. This mimics how our brain works. Human brains must be programmed to react to some visual patterns and take corresponding action. As the viewers of photography, we seek the same visual patterns in pictures and we codify them as composition rules. This is just my theory at this point. If you find an article or video talking about this topic, please let me know in the comment below. Let's explore more composition rules and discuss how each of them may have helped the human race to survive. Frame within a frame. The rule says having a frame within the image gives it a balance. Similarly to the foreground element, seeing this pattern means you are hiding behind tree trunks or you could even be in a cave. Either way, you feel safe and relaxed. Let's talk about a few photography subjects. People love the pictures of sunset. The orange light indicates clear sky and good climate. Rainbow and fog mean the moisture is in the air and you are likely to have rain and water. Snow and ice, especially in the sunlight, mean there is a source of water and the temperature is around freezing point. Cold but survivable. Here are more composition rules. Use repeated patterns and vertical lines as a background. Vertical lines indicate trees that provide shelter from the rain and maybe also food. Other geometric shapes may be a bunch of rocks where you may find a cave to use as a shelter. Use light and shadows on the subject. When a beam of light is casting on the people, that means they are under a tree or other kinds of shields against direct sunlight. If someone is looking out into the light, it means they are in the hiding and scouting the outside. Symmetry. Symmetry is often found in the form of animals and plants, and we are programmed to pay attention to them. If an animal looks symmetrical,
That means it's looking directly at you and it's a predator. You have to look at it right in the middle of your vision and focus on it 100%. That's why a menacing tiger looks good when placed in the center of the frame. Reflection. Reflection in nature doesn't happen on the sea that has waves. It only happens on ponds and lakes under calm weather where you can drink the fresh water comfortably. Isolate the subject. When hunting animals, if you go after the whole herd of animals, you may end up catching nothing. It's better to focus on one target and go after it. Negative space. Similarly, you have to have an empty space or negative space around the subject to give it focus. When a person or animal looks toward one way, you need to have more space in that direction. If it's the animal you are hunting, it may start running toward that direction, or it could be watching out for a predator. Either way, you have to turn your attention that way. For the rest of the rules, my theories are a little shaky. Let me know if you have better suggestions. Rule of thirds. This is probably the most famous composition rule. It tells you to place the subject at an intersection of this grid. By doing so, you keep an eye on your target but also look a little sideways to be aware of your surroundings. It may be similar to the negative space rule. Rule of odds. The rule says having 1, 3, or 5 subjects in the image helps you focus more than having an even number of subjects. If you go after 2 animals, they will just split into left and right, and you can catch neither. If you go after 3, you are more likely to catch the one in the middle. I know it's a stretch. So, think about this. Million years before camera was invented, our ancestors already knew the photography composition rules. They would hide behind the bush and their animal instinct would tell them, "Cool, I included foreground layer in my vision." They were hunting deer and they felt like, let's isolate the subject and use rule of thirds to look out while I'm hunting. But when a bear showed up, the symmetry rule would kick in and they would think, keep him in the center of my vision and slowly back away. And they survived. When you say composition rules, it sounds complicated. But if you follow your basic instinct to capture an image that makes you comfortable, it's likely to become a captivating image. Instead, if you frame it to make you feel uneasy on purpose, you will create suspense in the image. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. I would appreciate it very much. Thank you, and happy shooting!